Lead by inspiring, lead by experience, lead by example, lead by. The Leadership Podcast brought to you by Ezeni. My name is Matt Stankham and I'm your host, bringing you thought-provoking, inspirational chat every month. Hear from leaders, business owners, coaches and subject matter experts from across a variety of industries. So however you consume your podcasts, turn up the volume, relax, and above all, enjoy this month's guest. Hey, welcome back to another Lead By with me, Matt. It's great to join you and have you in this format. We're back to a virtual format like I've done for the last couple of episodes. And today I'm very lucky to have a new guest, a new name that you won't have been associated with in ezeni's format before, but a familiar name and friend from LinkedIn. PJ, welcome. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks, and nice to see you. Nice to connect.
This has been a long time coming. We've been in and out of dialogue for a couple of years, and this is one of these moments that's finally come to fruition. So it's fantastic to have you joining me on our podcast. And just to get the spoiler out there now, I'll be doing a similar thing for you in the coming weeks and months. So I'll be on your series at some point to share some leadership insights. But today it's all about you, leading by example, and as a business coach, consultant, and fractional specialist, I think I'd love to have an intro from you. First of all, talk about your career history and what you do, and then we can get into some really great insights about business leadership, consultancy, and all the things you come across, and a little bit of storytelling as well.
Thank you so much, Matt. Look, I'm going back many years. So when I was born, the Beatles were number one, and I was Chris and Paul John. That soon got shortened to PJ, and I just think it's interesting when you look back sort of historically at things. But in the about the last sort of 20, 25 years, I've been in, as you rightly say, in this space of people and change. And I think people are absolutely amazing. When we want to be brilliant, there is little or nothing that we cannot achieve. If you think back at pharmaceutical breakthroughs, engineering, barriers, borders that we've changed, when we're at our best, we are fabulous. And there's so much potential that exists in business, knowledge, creativity, ideas, ambition. But as businesses, we often fail to access that. And so the high level role for me is how can I help you as a business access that for good, whether it's problem solving, change, team building, projects, tech. That matters less. But I think we're brilliant and we do have a duty of care to the business to access that brilliance in people.
Yes, and you're probably underplaying your skill set because you have some incredible qualifications and background in this space and many years doing it, as you just touched on. So let's just talk about where it all began and really what sort of background you have and why you do what you do today as a consultant and business owner yourself.
So I had a couple of jobs, as many people do. As you kind of start your career, which are quite entertaining. And then I found I was working for a customer who said, "Hey, listen, we need to do some conferences and we need to go on a bit of a tour and we need to elevate performance in the business. We need to engage people." And I reckon this is certainly 25 years ago. Could you do that? And I said, "Look, I'll have a go." In other words, I don't know. I don't know if I can, but I suspect I can. So let's have a go. And that really began my journey, not just of serving businesses, but also of learning. So I've actually done more learning since then than I kind of should have done. So it does seem daft, but learning for me is very important, not just with customers and when I work on sort of programs, but I like to keep up to date with a number of things that are happening and what's going on in the world. But yeah, so I would have to say it was actually by default, but something triggered me around this people thing that said, we're amazing. And that's when the learning started.
Yeah. And again, I've said this to many guests on this show, in the spirit of lead by, the name stemmed from lead by example. I guess what you've inadvertently done is in offering support consultancy, you've had to lead by example. You're developing in yourself, investing in yourself in order to be the best you can be. And I think you're being very modest at the moment. Again, looking at your background and knowing a little bit about you, MBAs and qualifications through Harvard Business School and various other things, I believe. So,
the funny thing with MBAs, I mean, over many years, I've actually taught on them. I worked on them before having one, and then you can. But it's an interesting. One reason I enjoyed doing it was to almost find out: do I know what I think I know? And actually, the fact is, as a chum of mine who is great. We know when you know somebody well and they're honest. I say, hey, look, I've done really, really well. I'm in the top 1% of something. And he said, well, to be honest, you bloody well should be. If after 25 years you don't know it. And I thought, thanks very much for putting me in my place. But that really was what that was about. But you still don't. Of course you don't know. It just helps, I think, refresh things and learning that continuous improvement, continuous learning and development. And by the way, whatever you used yesterday, things you knew yesterday are not worth what they were today. The world is changing that fast. And there was a piece at Cranford I was reading recently that they suspect there will be more change in the next 5 years than the previous 50. And look what happened at COVID. We thought we understood things. COVID came along and we didn't understand anything.
Yes.
So,
completely rock the boat.
No, absolutely. But staying attuned to the marketplace, to your people, to your customers really matters. And that can change daily. And if you don't stay attuned, you look at things like Kodak, for example, Nokia, you think you're, remember, you may not be old enough, but there was a thing called Encyclopedia Britannica. People say, one day's worth something. The next day, their door stops. You can't give the things away.
Yeah.
So change is this, change is inevitable, as I say, or change, the cliche, change is happening faster, quicker. And you have to, you have to lead that. And that means developing self, learning and growing, doesn't it?
Yes, yeah, you're absolutely right. That the change is constant, and that term VUCA exists because things are uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. So it's very prevalent now. And as consultants to businesses and operations, this is I think what we probably deal with more than anything is trying to decipher those uncertain moments and how you can fill those gaps and help aid performance. So in your world, PJ, again, describing what you do in a paragraph, what exactly do you do and how do you get involved? What is that synopsis of you?
So there's a range. There's a continuum of things I do. Some are very simple. Things like coaching, one-to-one coaching. Let's go at that end. The simplest thing, work with one person or a few people, coach them individually to help them move, to help them move from here to there. In fact, coaching, if you go back to the 1600s, simply meant to move a VIP from one place to another place. Well, yes. That's it. That's all you're trying to do is move somebody from here to there. And that's what I do for individuals, teams and organizations. You're trying to move something from here to there. So you've got the individual, then you've got perhaps some teamwork, and then the organizational level, which might require high level consultancy, data analytics and so on. But you're still trying to help them move from one place to another place, that notion of improvement or development. But sometimes it's just a little shift. Other times it's a significant transformation. But I go back to what I was saying at the beginning, really is so much of that is people orientated. You can write the best plan and the best strategy in the world. You can give, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of pounds to some of the top consultants that you'll know. But if people don't fancy delivering it, if they're not engaged with it, then guess what? It will not deliver on, your expectations. It'll take twice as long, cost twice as much. It'll be tiring and difficult because change it's emotional, it's difficult, it's risky. And in change, people fear loss. Even if it's a positive change, they still fear loss. And so when you were saying earlier about what are some of the gaps or, with some of the uncertainties you have to look at, businesses know it. If you go to the people in the business or around it and you ask them what's the challenges to delivering this project on time in budget or what are we uncertain about, they know the business the business has to have the courage to ask those questions and upload that information, make sense of it, prioritize it, focus on what really matters. And I guarantee you will deliver change or transformation or any project faster, more efficient and effectively. You'll move faster to value. You make more money. You'll have more fun by using the knowledge that already exists, that you already pay for.
Yeah. And I guess the difference between when you started out and now is that change is heavily influenced by technology. Just as in my career, in a little over 25 years, the world has moved vastly. And I've mentioned on the pod before, in automotive and selling and management, and now into the world of L&D and performance and coaching. So the world has changed. And since COVID alone, the world has changed hugely. But now the real threat or perceived threat to people is AI and the technological movement there. What's your thoughts on that? I think there's some real merits and benefits of such tools, but what's your exposure to that with the clients you serve?
AI is absolutely amazing. Now, as leaders, we do need to understand it. We need to make sense of it. We have to be responsible because it's still our business. We're still responsible for the lives and well-being of people, of customers, clients, and so on, of stakeholders, investors' money. There's no doubt. Look at the number of articles that are produced on LinkedIn now through AI. I mean, you can kind of spot them, can't you? They've got a certain tone. But look, there was a customer I was working with, probably 18 months ago now, and they were looking to employ basic AI to look at scheduling, processing, planning for work, for servicing gas boilers, actually, for how do you manage staff and their movement and their timesheets and how they get paid. And what we had was one of the teams, a number of people in a team, and they were concerned that they'd lose their job because of AI. If we use this to implement these services to timesheets and so on, then what will we do all week? And the conversation we had to have was, look, at the moment you spend a day a week talking to customers, clients, staff, and so on, 4 days a week form filling. We're going to reverse that. You're going to spend 4 days a week talking to people and a day a week form or checking the forms. That's going to free you up to provide better service. The people-only skills, the conversation, the relationships, that human-only element, if you like. And when they understood that, it was fine. Now, this is a business of 30, 40, 50 people, I can't remember, but relatively small. But you still have those questions. Now, amplify that to 1,000 people, 10,000 people, automating things, of course it helps, but it's AI, of course it can provide you with benefits, but you've got to be very clear what those benefits are, what they will do, what they won't do, and how we'll behave around it. For example, do you have a culture in the business for innovation? Do you have a culture in the business that accepts change and opportunity willingly or unwillingly?
Yes, and I think the part that you touched upon resonates for me is cultural elements in a business. And, that comes from people. That's something that technology at the moment isn't going to replace. So to get to a space where we can advocate the use of technology and be cleverer and smarter about where we use those tools, you have to have a leadership team and a strategy that says this is how we'll use it and where to get the best out of it. So this is something I know we've spoken loosely about outside of this podcast through LinkedIn, but in terms of culture and feedback and building high-performing teams, what sort of skills are you seeing now required in organizations versus, let's say, 5 years ago? What do you think is really important?
I think there's a number of points there, but let me just pick up on a couple of quick ones, if I may. And let me just use the C word, the COVID word. We went into COVID, most leaders went into COVID, let's be honest, without a clue. No idea how they were going to lead. They weren't particularly good leaders before, and they were found out in and around COVID. And they may not be good leaders now. Some were excellent before, they were excellent through it, they're excellent now. Let's just get that clear. But many leaders are leaders by accident, and I'm sure you've kind of heard that. They've been there a long time, they've been promoted, and suddenly they lead, and they really shouldn't be. They really should not be leaders. Promote them in another way, or pay them more, or why promote your best salesperson to be a leader? When they may actually be hopeless at it, or your best technical expert to be a leader. You're a great technical expert, but why should you be able to lead? It's a very, very different role. It's a very different skill set. So we went into COVID, and I think what happened, to try and answer your question, is if you think of Adair's model, team, task, individual. At the time, the task was to get individuals home safely. And we forgot the third element of team. Now, I don't mind if you call that team or community or network. But since then, I think we've forgotten how to bring people together. I think leaders have forgotten or find it difficult to bring people together to problem solve, to build relationships, to build trust. And so some businesses are struggling with that trust, that connection. Human beings tend to be, with respect, pack animals. We like groups, clubs, villages, towns. We join clubs. We live together. Few people live on their own out in the wilds. And I do appreciate there are some people who prefer to learn individually, who prefer to work individually. I understand that. But primarily we're pack animals. And I do think we've forgotten some of the values that come from that, like problem solving. let's get together, discuss this thing, tap into the collective brilliance in the room for a couple of hours, and not just 10 minutes, and invest in those relationships. So, the question about what am I seeing in leaders is we need to empower, encourage leaders to do that.
Yes.
Have the skills to bring people together. Maybe for leaders admit they don't know the answer, but the wider group might, if we connect ideas together. And I think one of my jobs is actually connecting people and ideas for good, because they exist. We just kind of need to do it. So, and I know businesses struggle sometimes to get people to come into work or get people to meet up. And I was working with a customer a little while ago, and I said, listen, let's get together and talk this through, this problem for a day or two at a very senior level, as around their strategy. And she said, oh, we haven't got time for jollies. And I couldn't fire that person, but I wish I could. By the way, they left shortly after. And this is a senior leader of a 1,200 person. We haven't got time for jollies.
Wow.
Are you mad? If you
they've
guys
hired you in the first place, haven't they?
Well,
so they were committed to doing something.
But if you're not aligned on that strategy, and often we see people, by the way, they say they aren't. Leaders aren't. And so it kind of gets watered down, or you get the different views of it, different versions of it, and it creates silos and misunderstanding and Chinese whispers and things like that. But getting together is so valuable. So that's one thing I think. The second one, and just only made this on, is actually emotional intelligence of leaders.
Yes.
You can be technical expert, but if there's not an emotional engagement, we are emotional beings. Now, some of us are more or less, and some of us show it more and so on, but we are emotional beings. And you can give me the science and the data for change, but you know what? I'm still emotional, and I make an emotional decision. We still do. We think we don't, we do. Gut instinct, intuition, very, very important, especially in this day and age, I think. So leaders with higher or better developed emotional intelligence can make a huge difference. The SAS talk about grip self, grip team, grip task.
Yes.
If you haven't gripped self, if you're not in a good space, if you're not well, if you're tired, stressed, overwhelmed, then that's what you portray, and staff know that. People know that. So you've got to look after self-care. And that emotional part is ever more important, especially with all the pressures of changes, with businesses wanting to do more for less, to say with business happening faster, quicker. And so I think there's this higher level of emotion that some businesses are becoming more aware of, not all, but some are becoming more aware of, saying, actually, how do we tap into that stuff? What is that stuff? How do we make that? And for some, it's quite nerve-wracking, actually. It's quite worrying. You mean I'm going to have to be emotional, honest, genuine? Yeah, there's a degree to which you don't have to come into the room and cry every week, or come into office and cry, on a Thursday. No, it's not that. But just be a little bit more connected, lean into emotions rather than leaning out of emotions. And so those are two things I really think in the last couple of years have become perhaps more prominent. And I think we need to be much, much more aware of. And within them are significant benefits to business.
I absolutely agree. And likewise, my insights have seen and discovered the same thing, that some of the most switched on leaders and businesses are now looking at emotional intelligence to understand and figure out that demographic of people that need support. I think it's an underrated but massively beneficial area to focus on in today's modern businesses and modern leaders. I absolutely agree with you.
But if you talk about that, in order to enable leaders to be emotionally intelligent, like you're just saying at your client, I think one of the interesting bits is, do we have a culture that enables or supports that? Do we have that level of psychological safety? And I realize these things work, clockwise and anti-clockwise, if you like that. But, so do we have a culture that enables psychological safety? Do we have a psychological safety that, of course, impacts on culture? Are we able to talk about our emotions? Is that frowned upon? And that also comes from leaders. So if you look at the behaviors, do other leaders recognize those emotional traits as valuable, or do we frown upon them? Because as leader, fairly or unfairly, you are the most watched population in the business, and people look at it. So if you say, right, it's okay to have an emotional response to something, or it's okay to, we have the psychological safety and so on. Who decides if they feel psychologically safe? Not you as leader, your staff. Find out, get scores. Ask people. You ask people like us to go and have a look, and somebody will say, "No, I have a great team. Our culture's very psychologically safe. And then I go and ask people, and they'll give me scores of 3 or 4 out of 10. And what that means is I feel okay, but no way am I going to share my ideas with you. No way am I going to stick my head above the parapet. I'll do a good job, but you won't tap into that additional excellence or potential that exists in me, because I just don't feel safe enough. Because the last time I did, or you laughed at me, or the last time somebody else did, you laughed at them, or the last time, doesn't matter what it is.
And I've been in situations like that. I've represented companies and I've worked for people who have a similar way of leading people. And it kind of stems back to what you were saying earlier. Sometimes those leaders are just promoted by virtue of their previous role, their experience. So they're effectively managers of becoming strategists, and they're not necessarily equipped to be the leaders. They're very good at the technical, and you can see where there's that disparity in their knowledge center.
And that's great. We need experts. A chum of mine used to be a great salesperson, for years. And they kept saying, we need to promote you for leader. And he said, why would you do that? I love my job selling. I'm very good at it. I'm the top salesman in the business. Why would you blow that? And also, I don't want to do it. I don't really like that sort of responsibility. I don't want paperwork. I don't want to care about other people's careers. I don't want, and that's great. I don't want to care about other people's careers. As leader, you will. As leader, you want to coach and develop people. My mate couldn't give us, literally, so I just want the money. I want to be on my own, mate. And in the end, they fired him for, and can I tell a quick joke? He said, I'm going to open up a small branch next year. I'm going to take your business away. I'm going to open up an office next year. I'm going to take your business away. And they bought his business back and he retired to Portugal.
Oh, nice.
And he never, that was never his intent. But he said, because I'll just sell more, the customers will come with me. And so I'm sort of smiling. But if you think about, so maybe some examples of good, you can't say good and bad leadership, but of successful and unsuccessful.
Yeah.
Look at some, and we'll talk about leadership and culture just for example, as bringing them together generally. Look at Barings Bank 30 years ago. An incredible bank, well known, gone overnight, due to some culture of governance perhaps then, and leadership. 30 years gone. Kodak, Nokia, we got those sorts of examples that we kind of know about. But then look at some of the maybe HSBC, with their deferred prosecution agreement. I think in the States, I forget how long ago that was, but there was a few billion quid there with some issues, probably around culture and leadership. And then look at maybe some other businesses that we know. Look at Steve Jobs. I don't know, was it 25 years ago coming back into Apple and probably saving it. So leaders can be absolutely amazing.
I think that's quite interesting. Strategy is massive in this, because coming back to your point about Steve Jobs, he transformed Apple because what he did is he empowered his organization and his people to think about big vision, and he started to use language that wasn't self-limiting. So he talked about the technology needed to be better than anybody else's. He talked about the fact that he wanted a product that looked beautiful, but still represented the core values of the organization. And everybody would get behind that, from the top board management right down to anybody who was helping develop it or even sell it. Everybody believed in that product. And overnight, they transformed their brand into a global dominating brand worth more than any other brands on the planet. And it took, 2-3 years before Samsung could even catch up with the smartphone, and yet they had niggles and issues and problems. What made the difference wasn't the product, even though that was the output. It was the person that empowered the product to go to market. And I think it's always a great example using the likes of Apple. And today you've got a little bit of that essence in Tesla, but strangely enough, he's under fire right now because of some questionable decision-making and cultural parts of his organization. But technology gives people the springboard to show they're doing something differently. But the backbone, going back to what you said at the start, it's the people and the teams that will be remembered and their delivery of those methods. So I'm a firm believer in, when looking at organizations, people, teams, or whatever scale, it really is what you said, the people, connecting the information to them. And I think what you said was beautifully simple, but so poetic, is, connecting people with information. And that's what you do. And connecting ideas with people. It's the beautifully simple nature of All we want people to do is have a strategy, lead and inspire people and get them to do what they were always destined to do in an organization. So on that note, and I always ask this because I'm always intrigued to get the answer. With all your experience, PJ, what is the difference between a leader today and a manager? What are those differences, if there are, if it is that clear cut?
If it is that clear cut, then I would say, look, it's a manager manages things, processes, okay, manage performance, manage productivity, it's those things. A leader is about people. Lead, and that for me is the fundamental difference. Okay. Now, are there crossovers in roles? Of course there are. If you're a leader, you probably have to manage a budget. Right? Okay. But it's very, very different to leading people. So I will often say and of course, sorry, I must be clear. Some businesses call managers leaders and leaders managers. That in its own right does not help. Okay.
No.
So I worked for a business a while ago, and I had a conversation with chief of staff afterwards. And chief of staff said, what do you think of my about 8 leaders? What do you think of my 8 leaders? These are the senior heads of called leaders. And I said, we're having an honest, open conversation, none of them should have the title leader. None of them, please. It's not fair. Okay. It's trade descriptions because they don't lead. And I said, one of the reasons I suspect this to be true is because I asked, for example, one person, hey, listen, I need a meeting with you one-to-one. When can you fit me in? And they said about 8 weeks' time, 6 to 8 weeks' time, I'm busy. Busy doing what? What we want, leading people. I want leaders to have in the region of, 40% of their time in their diary to lead people, see people, connect with other people, coach, have conversations. Yes, you've got stuff to do. But 40% of your time, if you're telling me you have no time to see people, then I'm just not sure how you can be a leader. Now, when people listen to this podcast saying, I'm sure, that's not a good, that's not valid. Managers, processes, leaders, it's about people. And we need to get that balance. Both are important. Absolutely, they're important. But if you look at, say leaders, you have 2 jobs. One is to lead the business. Absolutely. Secondly, it's to behave in a way that creates an environment where people can flourish, can be at their best, and therefore deliver the strategy.
Yeah. And I guess the next logical question for me is how or who is creating the culture then that defines the high performance? Is it the responsibility of the leader to set the tone, or is it the responsibility of the people to empower up and set that?
So it's one of those questions, is it chicken and egg? I think you could debate it forever. Look, there is no doubt that people in the business look at leaders to see, how do you behave? What do you do? What do you say? How do you respond to my request, or how do you respond to this piece of information? And they notice that, and that undoubtedly sets the tone. But if we're looking at who is responsible for culture, then it's everybody. It's in everybody's best interest. It's in the business's best interest to develop a culture that empowers or engages, supports people to be at their best more often, and therefore have more chance of successfully delivering the strategy, the plan, the whatever it is. Everybody is part of it, and everybody has a role to play. Do some people have more of a role? For sure. Right? But everything you do, everything you say is part of the culture, whether you accept something, whether you don't accept something, whether you challenge something, whether you overlook something, whether you come in late, whether you fiddle your expenses. It's all part that you can't say, that doesn't count, because I'm afraid everything counts in culture. And what we need to do is have a culture by design. What culture do we need to create that will enable people to do whatever it is they need to do? For example, innovation, AI, change. Do we have a culture that really embraces change? And I'm afraid it is nothing more than hard work and nurturing and committing and investing. Culture isn't a thing you do this month, this week. Now we're doing culture. It's also not something to be handed over to HR. HR tend not to be well placed. It's not. They're too busy. They've got lots of other stuff to do. But it's the businesses, it's the board, it's the CEO, it's the business's responsibility. But everybody, I believe this, everybody plays a part.
Yes, it was interesting your point about HR there. But you're absolutely right. There will be leaders and managers out there who will shirk a little bit of that responsibility that's part of their job description to the HR team, because arguably some of that skill set is in their team. But what makes that what enables them to deliver those ambitions is their personality, the manager or leader's personality, and their values, beliefs, and morals. And arguably, if we knew all the answers, we wouldn't be sat here, would we, talking to one another? We're consulting and we're working with businesses in order to find those issues and bring stories to life and help create,
But
those
absolutely,
ideas.
you said about culture. You could have a great culture today that doesn't work tomorrow. It doesn't do what the business needs it to do. People say, when I joined the business, we had a great culture 10 years ago. I'm sure you did, but that was 10 years ago. The business was different. The marketplace was different. You employed different people. You did different things. There were different pressures, different requirements, So we need to morph the culture, but rather than by default, we really need to be doing it by design, I think, and really sort of committing to that. And when you do, the difference can be absolutely incredible. But telling me I had a great culture 10 years ago, it's no use to man the beast, really. It's what's it doing now? So I go back to, look at COVID. One day we are working in an office and the next day we've all been sent home. How does that culture work? Or if you buy another company, how are you going to integrate that? Do you want the best of both cultures? And we often talk about business culture, but what about when you then employ people from different countries and different cultures? How does that work? How do you get the best of those in? So it's an ever-changing beast, if you like, culture, but it's important that we keep up to date with that. That's why I say it's not a case of this quarter we're doing culture.
No.
Because, it's this thing morphs and changes, the world changes, people change. I think it's absolutely fascinating. Get it right, huge return on investment. Get it wrong, it can practically bring a business to its knees.
Well, yeah, culture by definition can go two ways. It is in its essence. If you think about the petri dish in a laboratory, if you give all the necessary ingredients to help something thrive, it will, and that can be a positive or unhelpful cultural element in your organization. So you've really got to have the ability as a leader to analyze behaviors, emotional intelligence, the outputs of your team, and really invest in them, because as you say, those trigger points can be on a knife edge. You can have lots of different personalities having a push-pull effect on what your business is doing. But the one thing that brings commonality is that vision and strategy, and being clear in communication, as we were talking about with the likes of Steve Jobs and many others around the world now. It's being clear. And interestingly enough, I've talked about with other guests is two elements, is humility and ego. And they're an interesting and opposing set of statements. But thinking about egos for a second, you've talked about one big ego in the past. Have you worked with an organisation with a big ego in a leadership position that's perhaps really delivered above and beyond their wildest dreams because they've done something in a certain way? Have you got some examples of that?
Ego is an interesting one, if I may, and but what we're talking about is a number of human-only traits that can make a big difference in a business. And I think if you can coach those and develop the right ones in the appropriate way at the appropriate time, it makes a big difference. And sometimes actually you need a bit of ego to push things through that maybe wouldn't get pushed through before. I'm going for this no matter what. The data says we might be wrong, or someone says, but I'm going to be first, and I'm going to put a man on Mars, or I'm going to launch this, I'm going to do that. And you probably need an element of ego to do that stuff. But conversely, I think when people just push ahead regardless with no idea, and they don't have that meaning or purpose, don't have people behind them, then I think it tends to be short-lived.
And for those that need to make those quick wins come to life in organizations, so they are trying to be a driving force in a time where things are changing radically, what do you believe is the fundamentals for a today leader?
Matt, listen, I feel very strongly about this, and you just notice kind of my body language has changed because
I saw a shift.
No, because it's very important. The leader or leaders, if they have the courage to go to the team with a challenge, a problem, an opportunity, and say, "You tell me what you know. You tell me what you think." Right. So, example, 40 years ago, open space. Put people in a room, give them a question, let them self-manage, self-organize, and they will work wonders. And I absolutely believe that. Is it uncomfortable to run open space? Yes, at times, because you don't know what the answer is going to be. But if you've got 30, 40, 50 people, staff, customers, clients, suppliers, and you say solve this, they will come up with some amazing stuff that you simply do not know as leader or as management team. Why not tap into that? Now you've got people owning it. Not only have they got the ideas for it, but they probably know how to do it. So why not access that first before you spend money on expensive consultants? Why not go to the consultancy in the business first? And that today's leader must be doing that, has to be doing that regularly, easily, creating an environment where that happens. And then using that potential. It won't sort of sort everything, but let's take charge of what we can. And that elevates people's thinking behaviors. It engages them. Those buzzwords, it encourages, it engages, it enables. And then we've got a different culture and a different business. And a business that's likely to be more confident sharing ideas. A business that's more likely to be able to manage change. So change is difficult and risky, and we need to help leaders to lead business change.
It's what's just come to light. It's really interesting. And you're so passionate about it, is the careful choice of language. And I think we're all guilty of it in life. Not just in this topic, but in life. We find language we can anchor to. And in the corporate world, we'll use words, as you said, authentic, and we'll use the likes of culture, as we've talked about throughout, and other things that we have an understanding at a basic level of what that means. But if you're a new leader, all you know is what you've probably seen or experienced. You're yet to determine what those things mean to you. So, as you rightly said, authenticity, I can define what I believe that is in me, but it's only seen by others. And culture, I might want to be a certain way, but it's only seen by others. So how do I get there? And that notion of putting people in a room and having freedom and having no holds barred, I think is, again, something that's it's an old way of doing things, some would argue, and it's proven over time that it is something that does work. But everyone wants to apply newfangled, new technology and the next bright idea. But actually what we're fundamentally asking is, what do we want our people to experience in order to determine whether we have great culture, great people, and therefore the best outputs? So that being said, putting people in a room and asking them those sorts of questions, tell me what you see or what you're experiencing and what your ideas are. What's your experience of that yourself in the consultancy role? How effective is that? Because you can do it once, you can do it twice, but where do you draw the line? Is there such a thing?
There's a couple of things that we do very specifically, or I like to do very specifically, and I'm sure there are other solutions out there. But one I just mentioned was open space, and to get people together for 3, 4, 5 hours, get a good quality question, and let people discuss the elements of it that they want to discuss, are pertinent, relevant. They have a meaning or a value now. Okay, so it can be uncomfortable for certain leaders because you're not. Normally these sessions are facilitator led, as in you tell them what to do and they do it. Because you're saying, no, you tell us which of the elements out of this you want to discuss. What are the problems that you see and can solve, which makes it very, very efficient and effective and huge value. So I really like that. Now, at the other end, I like doing a diagnostic that we have where we go to the business and we ask a question, and I interview people and we gather some data, and we work that through a couple of processes over several weeks. And what that does is it gives you very valid and precise information that the business can act on, that leaders can see. And it takes away the perhaps the general kind of conversation to where specifically is our attention today and where does it need to be tomorrow to better deliver this change? And sometimes that can be uncomfortable. And I'll give you a specific. A client from last year, one of their values on the wall is proactive. And yet when you talk to people and you say, what's likely to stop us or slow us delivering this project? And it's the fact that we are very reactive. Management is seen as reactive. Management seen as reactive. And how does that feel? Well, it undermines some trust. And we actually think management are a little bit immature. Now, look at that if that's a feeling in business, this is a great strategy and a great plan, but actually we think management are a bit immature. How likely am I to commit to it? How likely are we as a team to commit to it? And of course, you get other things, you get people focusing on other things as a result. But so management, it's now up to you, management. This is what you've been shown. You need to focus on this stuff. You need to make a shift in this stuff before other things will happen. And that can be quite difficult. So I think you need to open up a bit like a diamond. You need to open up thinking, get some ideas, look at some of those, and then start to close it specifically. Where do we need to focus our attention for good? And all I'd say is it's not always comfortable, but it is exceptionally good value.
And do you, again, from your experience, do you find that those targeted regions tend to be more process and performance, or do you find they are people focused then drive, the behaviours that drive the output?
When we do this diagnostic with customers, and it's light work for them, it's kind of heavy load for us. In other words, because I'm doing the heavy lifting, but it's firstly because we're external, we can ask questions that internal just cannot ask. No matter how skilled or talented they are, you just cannot, because of the safety. And also, I say sometimes we ask a stupid question. We don't have the histrionics or the politics. But we normally come up with, it might be 30, 40, 50 things, specific individual things. But often, to your point, there will be themes, and the themes might be around culture and teamwork and relationships. But also, they might be around external influences. Technology is always a big one. Yeah. So you've got the themes, but it's the specifics in it that matter. A company a couple of years ago, it's very, very interesting. One of the real issues they had was a very, can we say, overactive stakeholder.
That's a good choice of words.
I'm trying to be careful, but when I want attention, I want it immediately.
Yeah.
And they found that disruptive. Now that's data that you can go to the stakeholder with and say, just so you know, we're trying to do a really, really good job here. One of the issues to us doing a really, really good job is your behaviour, and it's seen as. Now we've run through this. We've interviewed people. It's come up. We've validated it. We've looked at the significance of it and the impact of it. And by the way, it's the single biggest hurdle to us delivering projects. Wow. Right.
Yeah.
Now it's not necessarily one that we want to talk about, but it's come up as number one. It's not the biggest gap, but it's number one. And then behind that were things like, as I say, culture and a funny one that came up was, I say funny because often people think they have a strategy, or leaders have a strategy, and then you find out that people in the business say we've no idea what the strategy is, so we're winging it. So the likelihood of it being delivered is minimised because we don't really know what it is. And then you can go back and say, so it may be that you have a strategy, you haven't communicated it, or you don't have a strategy and you haven't communicated it. It doesn't matter. But now you know but you've got to do something about it. So all this stuff is fascinating. And I think also there's a number of things you can do. So it's a continuum. But it's getting it right at the right time for the business.
Yeah. A formula there that you discussed is really relevant to feedback. And, I've again, off camera, sort of touched in this territory before. It's an area of passion for me. As if you want to find out about what people think about you as a leader, and what your ethics are like, and the decision making, you're going to need that structure. And the example you were just giving, I think, is a great point in case. If that person had more mechanisms for the open door, freedom for feedback, and measurements and metrics to support, colleague understanding and growth, then maybe they wouldn't be in that position where they were maybe outside of their depth, or saying and doing the wrong things by the people. And I think feedback is a very broad blanket statement, but in its essence, massively underused and undervalued in a lot of organizations. And they tend to just do a cycle once a year. Let's do an employee satisfaction survey, or let's do a cultural change and 3-year program, and let's see what people think. But stemming back to some things we've talked about, culture doesn't change overnight. It's led by people. It's led by the leaders and reinforced through values, beliefs, and morals. And interestingly enough, you saying about, again, the example of what's written on the walls, talked about this with Marion Whitty on the very first episode of Lead By. And she used the great phrase, it's not what's written on the walls, it's what's said in the halls. And I still love that sentiment of, it's so true. Many organizations do it and they don't even know their own values. So I think feedback and listening to what people have to say and doing something with that information is really, really critical to the success of everybody.
But if you
Really
come and
is.
say, so whether we call it feedback or feed forwards or whatever we're going to call it, it's information.
Yes, it is.
Some of it's good quality information and some of it's not so good quality, information. But how we acquire it, am I given it or do I ask for it? Because that's a real different mindset. If you as boss say to me, PJ, can I give you some feedback on that podcast you did or that presentation you did? Oh gosh, what am I going to get? But if I come to you and say beforehand, hey, listen, watch my presentation. Please, can you give me some feedback afterwards? I'm in a different mindset. You're we're in a different place. The relationship is in a different sort of space. And when you say to me, hey, listen, I thought you did this really, really well. I thought that worked. I think you lost it a bit here. I think great. What I would do to improve might be this. Thanks so much. Okay. So and then but do we have a culture of that? Does the business look for feedback externally and internally? Do we, as individuals, as teams, as the organization, and certainly as leader, and I say this carefully but firmly, leaders, if you're not prepared to ask for feedback or feed forwards or information from your business, from your staff, why the hell should you give it? Who gives you the right to give feedback? Who are you to do that?
Yes.
Do it. You're in charge. But if you want a culture, if you want to really change the culture, ask for it.
Yeah,
are you above it?
That's a great point.
It's
great point.
It's ridiculous, to be honest. It's absolutely ludicrous when people say, "Well, I'm now going to give you some feedback," but and then we're going to have. And then moving on, do we have the capabilities to have a coaching conversation afterwards? And they say an annual appraisal's no good. So maybe is it little and often? Is it regular? But I do think asking for it is one of the keys to. There you go.
No, I love it, and your point there is absolutely spot on in my mind. Is if you haven't got the capacity to take on new information and do something meaningful with it, then absolutely right. What gives you the right as that person in charge or leading people, the ability to say, well, I'm going to tell you what I think, because that's not a community, is it? That's not a workforce that are coming together through innovation and great idea exchange. So I think that's a really great point. One more question for you before we come to a wrap. If I was starting out as a let's say junior manager, taking my first move into a strategic role as a leader of people and change, where would I start? What sort of learning should I be focused on? And in your experience of the last 25 years, what should I be doing?
Yeah, I think any learning is good learning. Okay, anything. So look at some of the old models 30, 40, 50 years ago. As I say, ADAIR, situational leadership, team, task, individual. Go and read stuff about relationships, as you said. I think emotional intelligence, any of that stuff. But a piece of advice. Honestly, get a mentor in the business who's done it, who's recognized as successful, whatever that looks like. And honestly, find that support. Really, I think that's absolutely invaluable. Somebody that says not just somebody who tells you they're good at, but ask around who's been useful at, and then go and attach themselves to it.
Yes.
Really, really. As in not attached, but just go and get close to it and learn from that and get that advice and try stuff out, because I think that can make a huge difference.
Great point. And actually, it's just spurred a thought in my mind. Thinking about being a parent, I know you are too. I like to think of myself as a great mentor to my children, who are not children anymore. But in life, you try to share the best, most intelligent learnings of your life and your careers in order to provide them with the necessary tools to be great at whatever they want to do. And I think what I would advocate, bolting onto what you've just said, is finding great mentors, again, who can be honest and share the highs and the lows, because some of the most powerful learnings, just like me being a parent of my children, is when you say you failed at something, but you got back up again and you identified what was wrong and you're willing to go again. And those type of mentors are so powerful. And I've had the luxury and privilege of working with people like that, and also been mentored myself by individuals like that. So you and I are both on the same wavelengths, not just sporting great haircuts, but very, very similar wavelengths.
No, brilliant. Listen, this has been fabulous. Thanks, Matt.
No, it's been a pleasure. It's great to connect with you again. And I look forward to joining you on your podcast too. Yeah. For those that would like to know more about what you do and where to find you, where can they connect with you?
My website, pjstevens.co.uk. I'm on LinkedIn as well. I'm PJ Tips Podcast, hashtag PJ Tips. But PJ Stevens, come and find me. Come and have a chat. Always willing to help, because I think together, we have a duty of care to not just this country, but to businesses, to build better businesses for good. We have the potential. Now we've just got to take ownership and do it.
Wise words. Thank you so much for joining me. It's been a privilege to have you on, and I look forward to joining you again soon.
Cheers.
And for everybody listening, thanks for listening and joining us on Lead By for this episode. Tune in for more and look at the show notes for more information about PJ and what he does. See you again very soon.